I'm wondering, how did you approach? Okay, so you collected all this data. I don't know. I'll just ask. Did you think you had a hot topic when you collected all the data? And you were like, well, I'm just going to submit this anywhere because who knows who'll accept this paper? Or did you like, okay, I got a hot topic here. I am going here with it. So, what did you think you had? Did you think you had a bombshell or not when you wrote up this paper?
Well, I don't know if I should say this, but I told Alice that I was feeling like the Jane Goodall of cows.
Right. Hello, and thanks for joining us for this episode of Dairy Digressions, a podcast of the American Dairy Science Association, a Journal of Dairy Science, and JDS Communications. I'm Matt Lucy, former editor-in-chief of the Journal of Dairy Science and JDS Communications, and a fellow of the American Dairy Science Association. I'll be your host. Dairy Digressions offers an insider's perspectives on the science and scientists shaping conversations both within and beyond the dairy sector. We highlight innovative research that advances understanding and fuels progress in the production and processing of milk for people around the world. Today, we are speaking with Dr. Antonio Osuna-Mascaró, who is author of a recent paper entitled Flexible Use of a Multi-Purpose Tool by a Cow, published in Current Biology in January 2026. Dr. Osuna-Mascaró is an animal cognition researcher whose work bridges evolutionary biology and experimental psychology. Antonio is a trained biologist with 2 PhDs, one in paleontology, another in comparative cognition. He completed his research on tool use and physical cognition in Goffin's cockatoos, which we're going to talk about, under the supervision of Alice Auersberg, a leading figure in comparative cognition. Today, Antonio continues to explore the tooling abilities and problem-solving skills of these remarkable parrots at the Goffin lab. The Goffin lab is part of the Veterinary Research Institute, housed within the historic University of Veterinary Medicine in Vienna, one of the world's oldest veterinary institutions, founded in 1767. The Goffin lab was established by Dr. Auersberg in 2011 and is located in Lower Austria. It's a state-of-the-art research facility dedicated to studying the cognitive processes of these cockatoos. The Research Institute itself is internationally recognized for its interdisciplinary research into human-animal relationships, integrating biology, veterinary medicine, psychology, philosophy, law, and ethics. A core part of its mission not only to advance scientific knowledge, but also communicating those findings to the broader public, something Antonio is deeply passionate about. Antonio, I want to welcome you to the Dairy Digressions podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here talking about Veronika.
As we were speaking earlier, and I'll tell our listeners, if you haven't looked at this paper, if you haven't looked at the video abstract, which I believe is available, I think it's an open access paper. The paper is open access. The video abstract's open access. We will put the video abstract and the paper in the show notes. You need to take the 2 or 3 minutes on that to watch that video abstract and take a few more minutes to read this paper. And Antonio is going to explain a little bit about that. So Antonio, before we even get started, because everybody's wondering, why are we talking about a cow named Veronika? Can you just give us, we're going to dive a little bit deeper as we talk, but just give us a general, what's this paper about? Why is Dr. Lucy so excited when he saw this paper? I mean, what is it about?
Of course. Yeah, well, if I have to put into a few words only what is this paper about, I will say that it's the first experimental demonstration of cattle being able to use tools at all. And not only that, we found a cow, Veronika, who is really flexible using tools. So she used tools as a multi-purpose way. And this is completely unexpected and a shocking discovery, even for those people, those scientists like us that have been dedicating their lives to the study of tool use in nature.
That's the thing about this paper. My daughter texted me, hey, you need to look at this paper. And then I'm reading Science, and Nature, those are the preeminent scientific journals, and they are mentioning this paper. And then the New York Times is mentioning this paper. And then finally I got hit enough times. I'm like, I'm going to look at this paper and I'm going to email this guy. I can't imagine he's going to want to talk to me on dairy digressions, but I'm going to email this guy. And then the third surprise was he emailed me right back and said, sure, I'll talk to you about this paper, which has really been a highlight. And so for you people, for listeners that aren't familiar, tool use, and Antonio's going to explain that, tool use is not something that's widespread in the animal kingdom. Okay, so just to frame it, Antonio, and I know you work with the cockatoos, and I know that your whole lab is dedicated to sort of understanding cockatoos. A quick digression, do cockatoos use tools?
Goffin's cockatoos use tools. Not all cockatoos, but this particular species that is coming from the Tanimbar archipelago in the Moluccans, Indonesia, they are really good at using tools. They use tools at the level of primates. So they can solve problems. They can solve problems in an innovative way by making, modifying, and using their own tools in really also fascinating ways.
So, am I pronouncing it right? I say Goffin. Is that pronounced correctly?
Yes, it's Goffin's cockatoos.
So I did pronounce that correctly. And I think the other thing our listeners need to understand is you mentioned that, and maybe I was incorrect when I said all non-human primates, but you mentioned chimpanzees specifically having this capacity to use tools, but there's a lot more primates than chimpanzees. So is it only chimpanzees that have the capacity for tool use and these birds that have the capacity for tool use, or is it all non-human primates?
No, not at all. Tool use is a rare phenomenon in nature, but it's a diverse phenomenon as well. So there are not so many species using tools out there, but they are really diverse. So you will be able to find insects being able to use tools, like wasps, digger wasps. They can use tools. But you will find also dolphins using tools in Shark Bay in Australia. You will find elephants using tools to scratch themselves in a way that could be similar to what we observe in Veronika. But you will find also chimpanzees, capuchin monkeys, crows, like the New Caledonian crows or the halala crows of Hawaii, and you will find cockatoos being able to use tools. So yeah, there are a few species out there using tools, but they are quite diverse. So there are so many species between these species that don't use tools at all, and they can't.
And to add the bovine, to domestic bovine to this list, it just brings forth in my mind, whoa. This is something, giving the domestication of this species and its role in food production. This is something we need to understand. You just cannot ignore this phenomenon and go, oh yeah, whatever. You need to understand this. I mean, what's the deeper meaning of this? And we're going to sort of dive into that. But before we sort of dive into the deeper meaning, I'm just curious. I'm just curious about this article, okay? And I'm curious about how this all got started. Okay, so you're sitting in your office and you got your birds and your cockatoos and you're doing your work and you're typing and you're out there experimenting. And then some guy calls you on the phone and says, hey, Antonio, you want to come up here and look at this cow? Or how did that work? How did the initial contact occur?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting story. Alice Auersperg, head of the Goffin lab, she published a book on animal innovation last year. And she's receiving so many videos and emails from people telling her that they have examples of animals using tools. And in most of these cases, what Alice is finding is, interesting behaviors, like, for example, a cat being able to open a door, or a cat using the Amazon box as a shelter. But those are not cases of tool use. We are very, very, very picky or specific when we talk about tool use, right? When we use a very restrictive definition, and for us, tool use requires being able to extend your own body limitations in a way that you are gaining a function. So something that before was difficult or impossible, now it's possible thanks to this extension of your own body limits, right? So you need to handle and control the angle and position of an object that becomes part of your body in some way. So Alice received one video of a cow performing what we call tooling. And we were amazed. She sent me the video immediately, and then we decided to go there and meet Veronika.
Stay connected with the latest science and the people behind the breakthroughs at the ADSA annual meeting. We're heading to Milwaukee in 2026 from June 21st to 24th.
So we had to drive from Vienna, for people living in the United States, this is not a great length or distance. But for us, driving from Vienna to the south of Austria, it takes 4 to 5 hours of driving. And for us, Europeans, this is quite a lot. And so when we arrived there, we found out that Veronika is living in a beautiful place. It's a little town in Carinthia called Nos in Gaeltal. And it looks like taken from The Sound of Music, one of these landscapes that people out there will expect from the countryside of Austria, right? So these beautiful green mountains, the forest, the turquoise lakes, the church bells ringing on the background, these kind of things. This was the first surprise. The second surprise was meeting Veronika's owner, who was not the person who sent the video, by the way. The person who sent the video was a reader of Alice's book who was visiting this Carinthia southern region of Austria. And the owner of Veronika, Vidgar Vigele, is one of the last traditional bakers and millers of the country. And he is a fascinating person because he is so motivated about nature conservation and animal behavior. And the third surprise comes by this, because Veronika is a pet cow. Veronika is not living like other cows out there in the world, but she's a pet cow and she's 13 years old. Quite a lot for a cow. And she has had so many interactions and opportunities to play and to explore the environment. And this is the reason why Veronika innovated how to use tools by herself 9 years ago, when she started picking up fallen branches from trees and started to scratch herself.
Interesting. So it was actually, she didn't start with the tool, the brush. I noticed that your publication has like a long-handled brush. Maybe, I'm sure you know exactly how long the handle was, but it looked like 4 or 5 feet or something like that. Oh, we say feet in America, so it's excuse us, a couple of meters maybe. I don't know. And because that was one thing I wondered. I mean, so cows, it's interesting that she started just picking up sticks, or maybe a limb from a tree and then eventually evolved into these other things. So essentially, now as part of the experiment, was the brush part of the experiment, or had the farmer already been giving her a brush?
Well, Veronika has been using tools for 9 years. And during this time, she has had many opportunities to use different objects as tools. Vidgar told us that her favorite tools are a long and a short stick, and she uses one or another depending on the body area that she wants to scratch. But of course, had experience also in the past with other brooms, with rakes, with different sticks of different kind, right? So the idea of using a broom was very related with the purpose of this experiment, because when we arrived there, the idea was that Alice was coming with me to Nos in Gaeltal, but just to meet Veronika and talk a bit to the owner, to Vidgar Vigele. But she was expecting to return to Vienna on the same day without, having an opportunity to see or to watch Veronika scratching herself. But, the idea was that I was probably going to need several hours or several days waiting, like in nature documentaries, waiting for Veronika to have an itch and scratch herself, right? But to our surprise, Vidgar took a stick, offered it to Veronika, and Veronika immediately extended her, of course, super long tongue, roll it around the stick, bring it to her mouth, and start scratching herself in front of her, eyes. We couldn't believe it.
That must have been crazy. You were like, what is going on here?
It was exactly like that. We were almost falling to the ground. So we already knew, or we had the impression that Veronika was using tools in a flexible way. In science, when we say flexible, we mean in an intelligent way. We don't use the term intelligence because it's heavy loaded, right? Each person could understand intelligence in a different way. So we say flexible because flexible means that you can adapt a behavior to different contexts, right? And this is what it means to be intelligent. So we already had the idea of this being a flexible behavior, but my task was to be there for several days in Carinthia and test if this was indeed a flexible form of tooling. So if Veronika was indeed using these tools in a flexible way, she will require, or we will expect her to do this in a repeated fashion. We will expect her to do this in a functional way, so to reach body areas that will be otherwise unreachable, and we will expect her to have sensitivity to the functional properties of the tools. Yeah. And when we say sensitivity, again, sensitivity is the safe way of saying something heavy loaded that will be Veronika being aware of what she's doing, right? She has the knowledge of what she's doing, right? So we use the term sensitivity for this. And the best way of testing this was finding a broom, because a broom has a functional end, which is the brush, and it has also a non-functional end, which is the stick. So the idea was to offer this broom, this tool, to Veronika in a horizontal fashion. And I was offering it to Veronika, letting it on the floor, looking to the left or looking to the right in a randomized way. So Veronika had to adjust to the position of the tool. And this was the origin of the idea of using a broom. After this, many other surprises came, of course.
Yeah. So Antonio, I think that was so interesting what you just told me was that this wasn't Veronika's brush. You, as an experimentalist, you said, okay, we're going to use a brush. A brush has two ends. It's got it's a brush on basically a wooden handle. It's got two ends. It's got a kind of a brush. Maybe I'm going to have to use American number. It's about, I don't know, 8 inches to wide. And then it's got a handle. And obviously Veronika I can't even believe this, like look at it and go, well, I'm going to use that big brushy part for my, I don't know, side and my back. And then, my tail, which is a little further away, I'm going to use the other, and it's a little more detail work on my tail and my belly. I'm going to use, how does a cow do that? I mean, how does her mind, like these are aspects of the cow's mind that we do not think exist. Fair?
Yeah, totally. We were not expecting something like this. Even for us, it was quite surprising. I've seen videos of cows being quite dexterous when using their horns, right? When they are interacting with their environment to open gates and things like this. But to be able to use tools in this way, what we call tooling, this really requires extending your body limits and to act as if an object is part of your own body. And this is something really impressive. And it's impressive for so many reasons.
Yeah.
I can tell you that the first impression that we had from the experiment was the confirmation of our predictions, right? Veronika, right from the beginning, showed us that she was using this in a functional way because she was addressing body parts that will be otherwise completely unreachable. She was scratching only the rear half of her body, and she needs a tool for that. And apart from that, she showed us a preference for using the broom end of this tool. She was using it like 2.5 times more often than the handle end of the stick. But the big surprise, as you say, came later when we were observing from time to time Veronika using also the handle to scratch herself. And at the beginning, we thought that this was the result of a mistake. We thought that Veronika perhaps was not careful enough when choosing which tool end she will need, right, to scratch herself. Or perhaps she was not sensitive enough. She didn't care at all about which tool end should she use. But eventually, after a bit, we started noticing a pattern. And indeed, she had a preference for using the broom end. But when she was using the stick end, the handle, she was also using it in a meaningful way. And this was the big surprise to us. Because, as you say, she was using these hard bristles of the broom to scratch the body parts where her skin is thick and hard. But she was also using the handle end to address body areas in which her skin is soft and sensitive, like the udder, the umbilical area, right? Or the tail base or her butt, as you want to call it. So yeah, she was using different tool ends to different body to address different body parts. But if you ask me, the most surprising thing was to find out that she was using different techniques when doing so. So when she was using the broom end, see, this is the kind of brush or broom that you will use to clean an outside area. So imagine that you have to clean out the outside your door of your house or a swimming pool, something like this, and you need to apply strength and pressure, right? So when she was using the broom end, she was applying this technique of side-to-side movements.
My goodness, right.
But sometimes she was using the same technique that any of us will use when cleaning the floor of our homes. She was raising the broom, resting it on the ground, and pulling. Raising, resting, pulling. Raising, resting, pulling. In a loop, right? The same technique that I will use when cleaning an apartment, right? But when she was using the handle end, she was addressing those sensitive body areas with a much more careful approach. She was gently aiming, pushing, and poking. Right. Pushing and poking, pushing and poking. So what this means is that Veronika was using this tool as a multi-purpose tool. And this is what we only knew of from chimpanzees. Wow. Chimpanzees from the Congo Basin. We know that many or a few other species use tools out there in the wild, right? But only chimpanzees use multi-purpose tools in a reliable way. And this was really shocking to us.
I think what's so interesting as I listen to you talk is you have to understand that Antonio, you're a postdoc analysis lab, if I understand that correctly, but Antonio and the rest of this research organization, they have specific measures or specific ways to understand animal cognition and tool use. It's not just you go out there and you go, oh, that's cool, and you kind of write up a paper. I mean, they're looking for some things that would define tool use and elevate it. And you said, and as you mentioned, what you're observing is only observed in chimpanzees, and a cow is doing it. And that's a critical kind of takeaway here is that, let's just understand that this isn't just some random guy going out and taking a few pictures of an Austrian cow and, oh, this is cool, and publishing a paper. This is a group of individuals that have dedicated their scientific careers to understanding this because it's a fascinating scientific question. And as I listened to this, I read your paper and I looked at your bar graphs and your statistics and stuff. I said, oh, this is different. And I think that's why you got so much recognition, particularly from like Science and Nature, because some people might not understand it. But as soon as I saw it, I was like, whoa, what is going on here? And I just think that is so tremendous. I'm wondering, how did you approach? Okay, so you collected all this data. I don't know. I'll just ask, did you think you had a hot topic when you collected all the data and you were like, well, I'm just going to submit this anywhere because who knows who'll accept this paper? Or did you like, okay, I got a hot topic here. I am going here with it. So what did you think you had? Did you think you had a bombshell or not when you wrote up this paper?
Well, I don't know if I should say this, but I told Alice that I was feeling like the Jane Goodall of cows.
Right.
Yeah, when I was there in Osh, I was telling everybody that this cow was going to be famous. Yeah. I didn't know, of course, that Veronika was going to reach so many people, right? I had already more than 40 interviews of this kind.
Yes.
I know that Veronika has been, viral in every single country that I know of. And I was not expecting something like that at all. But I was expecting Veronika to be famous because it was easy to see. When we work at the Goffin lab with the cockatoos, we have differences between individuals. There are individuals that are truly fascinating, that are mind-blowing. And it doesn't matter what kind of task you present to them, they are going to solve it immediately. And when I was there with Veronika, day and night, I had the same impression. I had the impression that Veronika was really something special. And I think this is, as you said, this is something important in relation to this particular study. and is that there is no room for criticism because the data is everything is so solid that there is no room for claiming that Veronika is not special or what she's doing is, has some room for doubts or criticisms. There is nothing like that.
What was interesting is about her, and I just want to give you some of my thoughts on that. Me as a scientist, I wasn't too uptight about the fact that it was one cow. That didn't bother me. And one cow can change the world, and just like one sheep changed the world. When Dolly the sheep was published, Ian Willman's lab, and demonstrated that you could take a mammary cell and recreate an individual animal from a single terminally differentiated cell. I always tell people that was one sheep, one ruminant, and it completely flipped the way we thought about all of development, the dogma of all developmental biology, which was once a cell was terminally differentiated, the only thing it could be was that kind of cell. It could never go back. And all of a sudden you have one sheep who says, oh no, it can go back. And I think that's Veronika's story. We've got one cow that says, oh no, there's a little more going on inside that head than we think. And sometimes it just takes that. It just takes that moment in science where people go, this is interesting. Now, I want to ask you a little bit more about that, but maybe I'll jump to this question now. So I don't know, when you do your cockatoo research, I don't know if you think about, and you mentioned already, well, some cockatoos are a little more clever with the tool use than others. Veronika tells me that the genes or the genetics, the genetic makeup for this is inside cattle, okay? Do you think that there are Veronika, just for whatever reason, I think she's a brown Swiss cow, ended up with the right genetic makeup to enable this behavior? That's one possibility. In animal production, we have cows that make way more milk than anybody else. We don't know why. They just happen to get all the right pieces of DNA put together, and they are crazy, make so much milk. I've never seen it before. Is that Veronika's story? Does she have a unique genetic makeup that all came together and showed us that these genes that control cognition and tool use are out there? They just don't always come together in the same individual. Do you think about it that way? How do you think about this exceptional case of Veronika? How do you think about what made her be?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, and it has an answer because when Alice sent me this original video in which we were watching Veronika scratching herself, and we couldn't believe it. The first thing that I did before going to Carinthia to observe Veronika was to jump on my computer and look on the internet for other cases. And of course, there is no other scientific report like this out there. But there are anecdotal observations of cattle, bulls, and cows using tools in a very similar way to what Vidgar Vigele described. So this idea of picking up fallen branches from trees and scratching themselves. And I found videos of bulls in social media doing exactly this. And there are many interesting things about this. But the most interesting thing of all is that in a few of these cases, what I was observing was Brahman bulls. Okay. And Brahman bulls, as you know, are Bos indicus. They come from a domestication event that happened in Asia 8,000 years ago, while Veronika is a Bos taurus coming from another domestication event that happened in Europe 10,000 years ago. And both lineages have been separated for around 500,000 years. Both of them are coming from the aurochs, those bulls that we were hunting and drawing on the walls of caves, right? So it's possible that this latent capability to innovate tool use was already present in those aurochs 500,000 years ago. So what we think is that Veronika is probably not the Einstein of cows. Perhaps she is special in a cognitive way, but she's the result of course, her genes, but also her environment. Because what someone needs to invent tool use is opportunities to invent tool use. Because there are different ways of using tools. Before, I told you that tool use is a diverse phenomenon in nature. It's rare, but it's diverse. And you can find even insects using tools, like the digger wasps, for example. But digger wasps use tools in a very rigid way. It's the opposite of a flexible way. And what I mean with this is that digger wasps are using tools in a way that is innate, is instinctive. They don't need to learn anything to be able to perform this tool use. What they do is to look for a caterpillar. They take the caterpillar inside the little burrow. They put their eggs there so they can emerge and eat the caterpillar in the future. But for that to happen, they need to hide the little burrow, right? Their nest on the ground. So what they do is to cover the little hole with sand, and then they look for a stone, a pebble, and they use the stone like a hammer to hide the entrance of this little burrow. And they do this, and it's fascinating. It's tooling, it's an extension of their body, but this is an innate behavior. So they don't need to learn this from anybody, and they don't need to have experience at all to discover how to do this. Perhaps they can improve in life, as many insects can do while doing things that are innate, right? Like the dance of bees. They do this. It's an instinctive way, but they can learn to do this better with experience. It could be, but it's innate and rigid. But there are other animals out there, like the dolphins of Shark Bay. When they use sponges, they hold sponges with their rostrum, with their mouth, and they use them to be able to dig better on the ground, right? And not hurt themselves while looking for food. And they learn this from their mothers. They learn this from each other. We have chimpanzees in the Gologo Triangle in Congo, the same chimpanzees that are using multi-purpose tools. And they learn also from their mothers how to use tools, and they use different tools, and they have to improve during their life. We have humans. We humans learn to use tools thanks to our culture, thanks to our social connections, thanks to our opportunities to play with objects, to experiment with objects when we are little, right? And we learn so many things from those things, from those interactions. And now in this club, we have also cattle, we have cows, because Veronika was inventing tools, right? She discovered tools. And if she was able to discover how tools work, it's because she had the chance to interact with so many objects during her life. And she learned what we call in science affordances, is opportunities to action. So if she was interacting with branches and playing with them, one day, perhaps, she discovered that these branches could be useful for her if she was using them in the correct way. What is super surprising, of course, is that a cow is able to reach that discovery. And after that, the flexibility with which she is able to use these tools, right? But if she was able to discover tool use at all, it's because Veronika is a pet cow, and she had plenty of time to interact with objects, and she had the objects also there with her to play and to interact with.
I thought a lot about your paper. And, dairy cattle in America are different from dairy cattle in Europe. Most of our dairy cattle in America live in what we call freestyle barns, which are just large barns, and there's stalls in there, concrete floor, and there's stalls, and there's a place where they can go eat. But there's not a lot of their stuff in there to really enrich their environment. Okay, they would never have access to a stick or something like that. And I thought to myself, I was thinking about Veronika, and then I thought the fact that she was using her mouth, she had to pick up that stick and use her head to do the job. And I thought to myself, well, that's her only option. She can't pick up a stick with her hoof, her front feet. I mean, she can't, the hoofs don't work like that. She has to use her mouth. And then I thought about the fact that, well, Veronika's a very old cow. So she had a lot of time to sort of, first of all, discover her own capabilities, but also to perfect them and start to understand them. No, we don't have that many 13-year-old dairy cows in America. And so there was a lot of things that come together to allow her to demonstrate this to us. I think she's probably an Einstein. I love that term, the Einstein of the cow breed. She's got to be, because I could imagine that not every cow would put all these pieces together. So I do think she is an Einstein, but we have Einsteins in humans, like Einstein. Brilliant, right? Make stuff up that nobody else thought of or could understand. And so we have this Einstein cow telling us. I want just to you to explain, or just for our listeners, that, there might be some listeners that hear this and go, oh, big deal. She goes and gets a brush and scratches her back. We know that cows in freestyle barns, if we put a big electronic rotating brush in there, they'll walk over there and stand under that thing. But can you just articulate, how is a cow that knows there's a big rotating brush in a freestall and stands under that? You're like, well, they'll be like, well, that's tool use. They're using a tool, just like, but can you just help me explain to those listeners, how is a cow walking over to a freestall barn and standing under a big electric rotating brush and having her back scratched? How is Veronika different from that cow? I mean, from that situation?
Yeah, exactly. We know that cows love those kind of mechanisms, right, that they can use to scratch themselves. But this is really different. Really, really different. If we use the tooling definition to define what we understand by tool use, then we have to consider what we call the special relations between objects. And we have to consider this capability of extending your own body limits. In primates and humans, this has been studied in a deep way. You can imagine a blind person using a stick, right? What's the term in English for the stick that, a cane, right?
A cane, yeah.
A cane, exactly. So you can imagine a blind person using a cane to walk the street. This blind person is using the cane as an extension of his or her own body, right? Is able to perceive, to feel the environment as if the cane was part of the arm, right? You can touch the cane on different positions of its length, of different points, and this person will be able to tell you at what distance from the hand you're touching the cane, right? Because in some way, this cane is embodied, is acting as if was part of the body. There are experiments with monkeys, capuchin monkeys, in which this has been studied in a deep neurological level. And it has been seen how literally the representation of the body limits in the brain are extended when primates are using tools in this tooling way. When you are fusing an object to your body and your movements of your whole body change to adapt as if this object was part of you. What we are observing in Veronika is this. Is Veronika using an object as an extension of her body in a way that she is able to apply different techniques, to be gentle on those body parts in which she needs to be gentle, to aim with it in a really precise way. So what we are observing in Veronika is really different from those observations of animals or humans using objects that are attached to something else. For example, imagine a bear approaching a tree trunk and scratching the back, right? The itchy back of the bear there. This is not tool use because the bear is not controlling the position and the orientation of this tree trunk. To be tool use, you really need to handle, to lift, to control fully the position of this object, right? And this is what we observe in Veronika. If we observe, if we attend to those behaviors in which animals are using external but fixated objects, we will see that dogs, cats, bears, so many animals out there are able to do this. But if we attend to those animals that are able to form this, what we call the body plus object system, that they are able to perform this tooling, what we observe in Veronika, then is when we realize how rare is tool use in nature.
It's just, that was a beautiful explanation. I can tell you, I think this observation is going to stimulate a whole wave of young scientists who are going to become very interested in these concepts and tool use and animal cognition. And I think there's a lot more to come. One thing that just popped in my head is, do you think Veronika could teach another cow how to use a tool? Do you think she could, or if another cow saw Veronika using a tool, would maybe that other cow go, that's a good idea, Veronika. I think I'm going to grab that brush. Give me that brush. I want that brush. Do you think, is that the same thing, or is that possibility? Because because I'm going to get in trouble, but we generally don't enrich the environment tremendously for cows. Now, in Europe, I know there can be regulations that cows need to spend a certain amount of time outdoors, outside of the barn, and it goes nation by nation and stuff like that. I do think that living outdoors can be a little more enriching environment than, for example, living in a barn or tied into a barn. But do you think if you had the right cow, and I think you'd have to have maybe I'm wrong, maybe you wouldn't need another intelligent cow. I wish we had more children out of Veronika. Do you think she could teach a cow this, or is that another level of animal behavior we don't understand?
Teaching is really rare in nature, but there are more and more observations now of behaviors that are close to what we consider teaching in our human societies. There is a big debate right now about the capability of other species beyond humans to imitate, because imitation is also quite rare in nature. What I mean by imitation is the imitation of movements, not the imitation of sounds. And there are people who, big scientists who defend the idea that imitation is possible and somewhat common in nature. We observe it in chimpanzees, we observe it in cetaceans like dolphins. And there are people who say that, this is a possibility, but imitation is quite rare and is mostly the result of our culture. So in most cases, when we see, for example, dogs that are able to imitate, are dogs that have been enculturated. So they have been living with humans for so long, or they have been trained in a way that they learned how important imitation is. Our cockatoos, for example, they learn from each other. So one of our cockatoos, the alpha of the group, Figaro, invented how to make and use tools in 2010 or 2011, but other cockatoos learn by watching Figaro using tools. The important thing here is to say that they learn in a social way, but not by imitation. They learn by emulation. So when they observe Figaro using tools, they don't repeat the exact movements that they observe in Figaro. They use the same tools. They get the same reward. Perhaps they look for placing themselves on the same pots and things like this, but they don't repeat the same movements. They find their own way of reaching the same goal that Figaro was reaching while using tools, but they don't imitate. Imitation is something that I believe other species are able to do. I believe that we can see it in chimpanzees, in cetaceans, and in other species, but it's rare. And it has to do with this obsession that our culture has. And when I mean our culture, I mean all human cultures has in relation to imitation. We imitate our offspring from a very young age, right? And we in some way train them to imitate us as well. So yes, I will expect perhaps other cows to learn from Veronika, but I will not expect them to imitate Veronika immediately unless we teach these other cows the importance of imitation. But perhaps observing Veronika will trigger the curiosity of other cows and will guide them to reinvent tool use by themselves by being exposed to what Veronika is doing.
I think that's just critical. I mean, we have to open up our minds here. Okay, we have to open up our minds. There's undeniable evidence that this individual cow has this capacity. So it's in there somewhere. Now, and people, you'll have the people who will throw a brush in a pen of cows and say, see, no one picked it up. But, this isn't how it works. Okay, this isn't how it works. She probably is an Einstein of all cows. It only takes one Einstein to be Einstein, And what I hope this does is she unleashes it blows fresh air into this whole notion that there's more to cows than we think. I think it was really interesting in your paper. I love the way you wrote this paper. We started out talking about Gary Larson cartoons from the far side. We all know he's got all these cows doing all this crazy stuff. And I thought to myself, well, this makes reading a scientific paper a lot more interesting when the intro starts with a Gary Larson reference. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. The editors just went for it, I guess, and I sort of love that. But I try to instill this sense of into people that there's a lot going on in terms of monitoring our thought patterns in the brain and how the brain works and how thought patterns evolve, and people sometimes don't think that's possible, but maybe it is possible that someday. I don't want anybody to read my mind. I think please don't develop machinery that reads my mind, But I think it might be possible to develop advanced techniques to understand a little bit more about animal cognition and how that all works. It's interesting, isn't it? I think what this cow does is I just hope everybody accesses this paper. I hope that young people listen to this podcast and understand that there are scientists, there are institutes out here that take this very detailed approach. They don't take it lightly. Okay. It's not, you mentioned that people send videos all over the world of these cows doing, or not cows, but species doing different things. Like, well, that's nice, but that's not really what we're talking about here. And I hope that they listen to that, and I hope they start to think about that. I don't know where this leads in terms of how do we change what we do with cattle, or how do we do more for them to make their lives more meaningful. I mean, I don't know about Europe, but in America, about 10% of the American diet is dairy products, comes from milk. So it's a big, and the dairy protein it's very good protein. I think we're going to be milking cows. Okay. I mean, that's what I think. And I think most of our podcast listeners, are going to think we're going to be milking cows, but I'm just fascinated by what this opens up. What does this mean? We're dealing with an animal that, does she inside that brain that we don't understand? Is she the cognitive ability of a chimpanzee, for example, which we think is, pretty close to people? I mean, I think we do.
Yeah, well, there's so many things to say about that. It's fair to say that we are not saying that Veronika is as good as a chimpanzee using tools, because these Congo Basin chimpanzees, for example, that they're using multi-purpose tools, they are using these tools in a sequence as a tool set with different functions. These are the chimpanzees that I was studying before coming to Austria to study the Goffin's cockatoos. And what they do is to fish termites. Everybody has seen this on TV, right? And they go to these big termite mounds and they open a hole in the termite mound with a hard stick, with a rigid stick. And once the termite mound has a hole on it, then they look for a long, flexible probe to insert it and get the mad soldier termites, and they can eat them, right? So sometimes these chimpanzees have been seen using a tool that has two different ends, two different functional ends, and they use one thick end to open the hole on the termite mound, and then they flip it and use the flexible thin end to fish those soldier termites. So when chimpanzees are doing this, they are doing this in what we call an allocentric way. They are targeting an external object, and they are using this multi-purpose tool in a way that this tool is acting as a tool set, a collection of different tools. What Veronika is doing is something different. She's targeting herself. This is an egocentric way of using tools, and the spatial relations, the number of interconnected objects, is slightly simpler. Mm-hmm. And also Veronika is using this tool in a multi-purpose way, but to target different body parts, to solve slightly different problems. So it's not exactly the same. It's fair to say also that my next project involves studying if Veronika is able to perform allocentric forms of tooling. So if Veronika is able to interact with external objects while using tools in the same way that those chimpanzees do, right? And this is still up in the air. This is something that still requires some research to have an answer. So we are not saying that Veronika is as good as a chimpanzee using tools, but it's mind-blowing the dexterity and the flexibility that Veronika has when using tools. If someone has expertise studying tool use, it's so easy to see that Veronika's technique is really advanced. She's really good at doing this. Chimpanzees require like 10 years of expertise to fish termites properly. And it's true that Veronika has been using tools for 9 years already, but her technique is also amazing. So it's not only the fact that a cow is using tools, it's not only the fact that she's using multi-purpose tools, she's really good at it.
We're going to have to wrap up. And before we do, if there's anything else that I presented you with a series of questions, and we don't always get through everything else. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners before we close the podcast?
I have two things to say. The first one is perhaps the big message from this study, in my opinion, and is twofold, this first point. And it's we have been living with cows for 10,000 years. There are more than 1.5 billion bulls and cows in the world right now. And it's only now when we are starting to recognize that cows and bulls are able to use tools at all, right? It's not a surprise that we are discovering this right now at this time, because we are now starting to be sensitive enough to attend to this behavior carefully, right? But it's really surprising because in our case, we have been studying tool use for so many years, and we study, well, in our particular case, we study the tool behavior of Goffin's cockatoos, these little birds that live in the Moluccas, in the most remote areas of the world, really exotic animals. And we know more about the tool using abilities of these exotic animals than what we know about those animals that we have been sharing our lives with for thousands of years. And this is really surprising. And this drives me to the second point, and is that this is the result of the strong bias that we have when we observe and we attend to the behavior of those animals that we exploit. We tend to underestimate the cognitive capabilities of farm animals in general, and all those animals that we exploit in general, right? And this is the reason why people laugh when learning about Veronika. Their first reaction is to laugh, in the same way that Gary Larson was representing this as something funny, right? A cow using tools, this is funny. And it's because we have these strong biases in relation to these expectations that we have about what those farm animals are able to do at all. So this is the surprising thing. And I would like to say something else, and is that we scientists need to be humble. And last summer, we were as surprised as you are right now learning about Veronika. We were really surprised, shocked by Veronika. So we need to recognize our lack of understanding. There are so many things for us to learn, and there are probably so many other individuals out there in the world waiting for us to study them. So knowing that you have so many listeners that have experience with cattle, that have experience probably with other farm animals, I will be very happy to invite them to contact me if they have or they had a chance in the past of meeting an animal that was using tools in this way, that was extending its body to achieve something, right? Using sticks, using stones, something like this. This will be really valuable for us, for science in general, because there are so many things that we still have to learn from those people that are in direct contact with these animals. And I'm pretty sure there are more examples out there like Veronika waiting to be discovered.
Antonio, I think that was just those messages you just gave were so powerful. And I truly appreciate, I'm really glad I asked you, do you have anything else to add? Because you have a lot of thoughts on this. I'm going to ask you just one quick personal question. It's not that personal, but you have such a passion for science. Okay. It's so obvious. Okay. It's so obvious that you're passionate, but did you ever think about what you would do if you were not a scientist? We ask these questions, and like, what's the other side of your mind doing?
Yeah, well, my whole family is a family of biologists. So for me, it would have been difficult. But I was hesitating about being biologist or not when I started my degree, right? And my three passions were biology, of course. I was also thinking about being an artist. I really like the artistic side of science as well. And I was thinking also about being a philosopher, because I really like to think deeply about nature. I have the luck of having a job that allows me to do all those things at the same time.
It's a fantastic story. I just think you did a great service to your science, the way you explained it. And And I too echo your comments. If there are other Veronikas out there, we need to know about them, and your ask is a wonderful ask. Hey, send me an email, send me a video. Let's take a look at that. And this was a brown Swiss cow, I think. So there we go. Now all the brown Swiss breeders are going to say, well, the smartest cows are brown Swiss. Okay, here we go. Okay, oh my God, Holstein, you Holstein people, send some videos. All right. Anyways, Antonio, thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate your time and your talking to the podcast. And thank you to all of you for joining us for this episode of Dairy Digressions. If you enjoyed the conversation, please like, subscribe, and rate the podcast, and consider sharing it with a friend or colleague. We always welcome your feedback. Feel free to reach out to us at adsa@adsa.org. And for show notes and links to this research, our past episodes and updates, everything happening at ADSA, visit adsa.org. Till next time, thank you for listening to Dairy Digressions. Thank you, Antonio.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to be here.
At Dairy Digressions, we talk to the people behind the latest discoveries in the dairy industry. If you would like to connect with those people, then the American Dairy Science Association is for you. The ADSA is where researchers, educators, producers, and leaders in the dairy industry come together. Join us and become a member today at adsa.org.